Hey everyone, so this is the first Arts Humanities lesson. I wanted to do this just like a normal class would be. So I'm going to go through these PowerPoints. If you have a piece of paper, please get that and a pencil. Write down some of these notes. It's just a couple of things. Um, Other teachers have decided to do like quizzes and things after their PowerPoints, and I thought this would just be easier and more like the real class. And I just wanted you to kind of sit back, watch this, and just look at these things that I think are really, really cool. Um, so, first thing, make sure you write your name on the top of your paper and then write your English teacher's name if you know it, because that's whose class I'm going to come into if we go back to in person school. And then we'll talk about this when we get back. But just a reminder, you have to have this class to graduate. Hopefully, you passed last year and you got half a credit, and then this year you'll get the other half, and that'll complete your full Kentucky requirement of Arts Humanities. So, just a few things, and don't write this down yet. So, at this time period, we're going to talk about the Renaissance first. The Black Plague has just happened, 1400s. It killed more than half of Europe's population. The worldwide death counts at 75 million. And then Renaissance is coming in, and it's supposed to be kind of a rebirth of everything. It's trying to circle back to normal life. So that's a rebirth of human creativity. They're trying to spread humanism, and education is starting to grow. And then ancient Rome and Greece were sources of inspiration for everything that they want to do. The famous people from this time period are like your Ninja Turtle ones that everyone knows. So Donatello, Raphael. We'll come back to the other two in just a minute. But then you have Jan van Eyck, and we'll talk about why this painting is mind blowing in just a second. Botticelli, hopefully you've seen this before. And then the first thing that I need you to really write down, and please make sure you write these down because this is going to be part of your grade, and this is a pretty simple grade. So, three types of paint: fresco. So, for fresco, just write paint onto wall. And then tempera paint, that's just egg and wet paste. And you just need to write these little sections that are underlined or in parentheses. Don't write the whole thing. And then oil paint. And these are paints made with natural oils. So this is an example of fresco. So this is painted onto a wall. This is the Sistine Chapel. We'll talk about in just a minute. Then you have tempera. So this is egg and wet paste. And then the big one, the most popular one, is oil paint, which is made with natural oils. And this is that painting by Jan van Eyck that we talked about just a second ago. So the thing that I really like about this painting is if you look at that mirror, so this one right back here, if you take a look at it, what's really impressive is you've got this circle that is the mirror that's the size of about a quarter. And inside that quarter, he painted the reflections of these two people being married, the person marrying them, as well as the artist painting the painting, which is kind of crazy. And then the other thing that's more, I think, a little more impressive is if you look at each one of these circles around the outside, that's about the size of an eraser on the end of your pencil. And what's crazy about that is he's painted all of these different scenes from the Bible into those little sections. And he painted all this using a one haired brush. And then a little more impressive is he has these beads hanging up. So keep in mind, this is your pencil eraser. And this is even smaller. And he got the reflections in there and all these little hairs. And then look at things like this little dog. So all the detail that he put into the hair. And then over here's their shoes. So you can see like the wood grain pattern on this. And then over here in the back, which a lot of people miss, this is the statue of Saint Margaret, which is the patron saint of pregnancy. Um, and that's always been a big debate among art historians is whether or not they're just being married or if she's pregnant. A lot of people back then wore outfits like this, so it looked like they were pregnant, but they actually weren't. But yeah, this is a painting that I think is really neat. And Jan van Eyck, you might not have heard of him, and the reason for that is because he was so good back in the day that a lot of people were kind of jealous, and he was really full of himself, and as he should be. And a lot of people didn't like how cocky he was with his artwork. So the first big person we're going to talk about is Da Vinci. So write these little things down. So this is he embraced knowledge. So he was very smart. He had a large interest in science and math. He's primarily known as a painter. He developed the technique of sfumato, which we'll talk about in just a second. And then his famous pieces are The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa. So take just a second to write those down. You can pause the video. Okay. So the big thing with Da Vinci is he had a ton of notebooks and he did a lot of sketches. The big thing that he would do is he would get cadavers, so dead bodies, delivered to his studio, and he would cut them open. He would study, what the heart looks like, how big is the skull, what's the eye shape, what does the musculature underneath look like, what are the bones, what does the whole skeleton look like. So these are all drawn from real people that he had delivered to his studio. Um, and then this is one of his biggest sketches. It's called The Vitruvian Man. This is supposed to be the perfect human. So by that, they mean um, like arm length and leg length and like the face shape. Like this would be the perfect human body if it existed. Then he also had drawings of babies and the womb and things like that. And these were just guesses. They weren't actually, he didn't actually have a baby delivered to him so he could draw. And then he started doing a lot of different inventions. So this is his invention for a flying machine. So this is hundreds and hundreds of years before an airplane would ever, you know, actually happen. And his idea is that you would sit on this little piece right here and then kick the little half circle piece with your legs, and that would make the wings flap and you would fly away like a bird. He also did these war machines. So this is one where if a horse was pulling this, the wheels would spin and that would cause all these sharp knives to spin around and cut people into pieces. He also did landscape drawings, did portraits of people and families. Here's one of my favorite inventions that he did. So he had this idea for a giant bow and arrow. So instead of having multiple people standing there fighting, you could just have one person. They would load this giant arrow in, and then you would hit this little pin, and it would shoot this giant arrow into a large group of people. He also had the one of the first ideas for a tank, which someone actually ended up building and recreating. And then this is one of his first big paintings. This is The Last Supper. Um, so a lot of people have probably seen this before. It's really famous. One of the really cool stories about this is it was restored a few years ago. It took them 21 years to restore. And what that means is they poured acid on top of it and cleaned off all the dirt and grime and hair and just things that have been there for hundreds of years. And then this is what it ended up looking like after they finished in 1999. Now, in class, I always ask, what do people like better, the left or the right? And usually people pick the left, the before, because of how dark the colors are. But they figured out that when they were restoring this, the colors weren't actually correct. And what had happened is someone else tried to restore it about 100 years after it was finished. And they came in, they said, oh, it looks like, this part of his outfit is blue. So they just got blue and put it on there. And then this part's orange and red. So they just put orange and red. And they didn't actually try and match the real colors that were originally there. Um, and so they took off all those old layers of paint that weren't original. And as you can see, more of the hands popped up, more things on the plates. Um, his mouth is open. That's something that got kind of covered up when they were trying to restore it originally. So a lot of things changed, and it is closer to the original. And then the other big thing that he did with this is he used 1 point perspective. So the focus is on Jesus in the middle, and everything is in line with Jesus and points towards him. That whole idea is that it's making the viewer look at this section of the painting, and you know that this is the most important part. It's also developed like this because he wanted the room, when you walked into it, to look like this was actually part of the room. So, like, this is how it looks now. This is how it used to be then. So, if you were to actually break down the wall, the background is what it would actually look like. And then something that's really crazy with this painting is during World War II, the Nazis were going around and they were bombing everything and stealing all these artworks. And this church was really worried that the Last Supper would get blown up. And so they decided to cover the whole thing in sandbags, and then they started dropping bombs on the church, and the whole church exploded except for the painting. That was the only thing that survived. And then they ended up building the whole building back around this painting. So it's kind of intense. And if you ever go, going inside is a big deal. You have to walk through this like cleaning station where it blows off all the just nasty stuff that's on you, so it doesn't get on the painting. But yeah, it's kind of interesting. His next and probably the most famous painting is the Mona Lisa. So this is just to kind of give you a size reference. So it's a lot smaller than people think. Um, and as you can see, it's kind of tough to see in person. Um, and then going back to something that we were talking about earlier, sfumato. So that means smoky. So what that means is he was painting so many layers of paint. So as it says, 40 layers. He would paint so many layers that it looked so smooth and kind of unrealistic. And then he would give it these smoky eye lines. So if you've ever heard of, smoky eyeshadow, that comes from paintings like this from sfumato. Same for around her lips and nose area. And then this is what they actually discovered was going to be the original Mona Lisa. Um, this was done by one of his students. So you can tell it's a lot clearer, a lot more vibrant. And this is, he changed a couple of things here and there, and this is what the aged version looks like now. And then just some fun facts. The name of the painting, Mona Lisa, was actually from a spelling error. It was supposed to be Mona Lisa. Um, and then the identity of the woman in the painting is supposed to be Lisa Ghiardini, who was 24 years old and a mother of two sons. It was a big mystery for years and years who she was. A lot of people thought it was Da Vinci at first, just disguised as this woman. He was putting himself in the painting. And then the painting has an imperfection. In 1956, a man named Hugo Ungaza threw a stone at the painting, which ended up causing a little bit of damage to the left elbow. Then the painting is considered priceless. People always want to know how much it's worth. The Louvre, which is where it's at, they're never going to sell it because that's how they get, people to come in through the door and pay the ticket money and things like that. So they'll never sell it because that's how they bring in so much business. But if it was to go to auction, the guesses are that it would start out at $1 billion. And then something else that's interesting, if you notice, she doesn't have any eyebrows. And that's because there was this one time when someone was restoring a painting and they accidentally erased them off. They were scrubbing too hard. Like I said, the painting's in the Louvre. It's protected in a climate-controlled environment. The whole room alone costs $7 million. It has bulletproof glass around it. It's insane. Okay, next up, Michelangelo, the last person I want to really talk about. So he's a painter and sculptor and architect. He considers himself just a sculptor, though, primarily. Make sure you write his name down as well as just writing painter, sculptor, architect. So this is him. This is a self-portrait. And then these are some of his famous artwork. So this is Pieta. So this is all carved out of marble, which is really, really impressive, especially with the amount of details he put into it. And then his most famous artwork is David. This is David. This is what he looks like today. If you notice, the hands are humongous. The big rumor around that is that this is supposed to represent the hand of God, so it's a little bigger and more in your face. But notice how he carved, the veins in the arms and things like that. It's really, really impressive. And that kind of gives you a little bit of a size reference on how big this is. And a few years ago, they restored it, and they were having a problem with people going in and wanting to break off pieces of the toes or whatever they could reach just as a souvenir. So they had to go in, repair it, and now there's a lot of security watching it. And then this is something that I just discovered the other day. This is originally how it was unveiled. They wanted it to be stored outside. Michelangelo did, and when he did, all of his all the people in the town kind of protested against him and said it was too vulgar, and it was nobody wanted that in their neighborhood. It was too bad for children to see. So they made him design this little leaf to cover up parts of David. Um, and then eventually he ended up, winning that battle and they took it down. And then they noticed that it was starting to get damaged from the weather outside. So they took it inside to where it is now. And then they made a copy to put outside to kind of show viewers what it looked like originally. Here's some of his other works. This is Bound Slave. And all of these are carved out of marble, which is super, super impressive. And then his other big one's the Sistine Chapel. So this is the most famous part of it, the creation of Adam. And a lot of people suspect that he threw this you know, little thing in the background to represent the brain. And so this is the creation, fall, and redemption of the human race. So all of this was painted by him on this ceiling. It took him years and years to do. And this is them restoring it. And then these are some of his preliminary sketches before he did the paintings. And then also just to kind of give you a little time perspective during this time period, this is when Shakespeare was big in creating his works. So he's the guy who wrote Romeo and Juliet, Macbeth, and Hamlet. But yeah, so make sure you wrote down those little things, store this away, and then just continue to watch the other videos. And if we come back in person, we'll start doing these in person, and we'll have like little projects and things for it.